Debra, welcome to the program. How did you get into theater?
Well, it actually started when I was about 3 and a half. My mom took me off to the doctor because I was really, truly bow-legged and pigeon-toed as a kid.
Okay.
And the doctor said, braces or ballet class?
They're both expensive?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, I'm just old enough that, putting braces on kids' legs was still something that was done.
Wow. Yeah,
so he was like, you got two choices. So off to Fort Wayne City Ballet I went. And once I got there, I kind of never left.
Wow.
Even moving, halfway across the country, we just picked up and go to the next place. So I was always performing from the time I was, I think the first time I was on stage was at 4 and a half.
Wow.
And just kept continuing on and doing different things. And then in high school, I wasn't one of those, I didn't go to one of those high schools like they have here in Texas. I went to a very small school in Ohio, graduating class of 102. Mm-hmm. So we had choir and band, and we were lucky to have those things. There was no drama or anything like that. So I was one of those kids who didn't do all the stuff after school, because after school I went off to dance class, 4 days a week, and then all day Saturday.
And you probably didn't get credit for it either.
No, it was it was, I still had to take PE and all those other horrible things that had to be taken. And then my senior year, the choir teacher decided, we're going to do a show. We haven't done a show in probably 20 years. We're going to do a show.
Why not? Yeah.
And he picks Gilbert and Sullivan's HMS Pinafore.
Oh,
let us go from 0 to 120. But he wanted something that the choir kids could do.
Right.
And I was like, wow. I had been in The Wizard of Oz in 4th grade. And, I'm sorry, no. Wizard of Oz was 3rd grade. I got to sing in the choir and pass out programs. That was the be-all, end-all. And then it was Peter Pan for 4th grade.
Right.
And that was kind of like, okay, wow, I got this taste of this thing called plays. That's awesome. And we always went to see shows.
Right.
Because back in the day, you did that.
Sure, yeah.
So as a senior in high school, I was like, he's going to do a play. I'm not in choir. How do I do this? So I went to him and said, hey, I know I'm not in choir, but I also know you have no dancers. I didn't know anything about the show. I didn't know there's no dancing in Gilbert and Sullivan, I was like, I mean, there's a little bit for the sailors, but it's not really like you're doing chorus line or West Side Story,
you don't think of it as dancing show, right?
So I went to him and said, hey, what's the deal? He's like, well, you can come audition. And so I convinced my younger sister, who was a freshman, to also audition, because she wasn't in choir either. Well, lo and behold, I get cast as Josephine, the captain's daughter. He was like, because I don't have any real sopranos. And I was like, why do you not have any real sopranos in choir? But whatever. I think he just was like, look, we can say this goes across the whole school then, because we have 2 kids who aren't in choir.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and my sister and I actually ended up playing opposite each other, because he had no really good tall tenor voice. And my sister has this incredible range. So she was like, I'll play a boy. I don't care. So, I'm then all full of myself graduating high school and going off to college. And I started at Youngstown State University as an astrophysics major. I was one of the big nerds. And I was like, okay, well, I know I need a PE credit. So I took a dance class my first quarter.
Right. Should be easy, eh?
I was like, I don't have to think about it, whatever. Oh, it's tap and jazz. Cool,
Yeah.
And it was actually listed as a musical theater course. And so then the next semester, or the next quarter, I needed just my arts credit. I'm like, well, let me take an intro to theater class.
Right.
Cool. Gives me something different than all these physics and astronomy and calculus and
blah,
blah, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I was like, and I needed a way into that building. So it was like, let me take this intro class. Lo and behold, the first season that I'm at YSU, the opera department decides to do HMS Pinafore. I'm like, dude, I know this. So I went to my professor and said, how do I audition for shows here? Because after all, I just played this part last year.
Right.
And she was like, well, that show was cast in September because it's the opera department. She said, but next week there's an audition for this little play called Quilters. It's a musical.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, I knew nothing about it. I didn't even know how to research it at that point, because it's not like you could get on the internet and go, Quilters,
Oh, here's a picture. This is what they do here.
Exactly. So, because I don't even think when the internet was not even a pipe dream at that point. But so I went to this audition, probably gave the worst audition anybody has ever given in their entire life. I cracked on everything I sang. I couldn't read to save my life. I was like, the words just all jumbled on the page. I was like, what is this?
Right.
So the director looked at me after the audition and goes, can you come back tomorrow? Like, yeah. So I went back the next day and he said, go sing Happy Birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat down with the musical director and I just sang Happy Birthday.
Right.
He said, okay. He said, can you read today? I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Handed me the script and I read. And lo and behold, the next day, my name shows up on the cast list. I think I kind of sort of got it out of him later, like by my 5th year there, that he only had the right number of girls audition, and he had me come back
so everyone has
to
it
make,
right.
to make sure. Oh
right.
my God, do I need to go find somebody else, or
Yeah.
can I use this poor
Right.
freshman girl who has no idea about anything?
Yeah, and oh, by the way, you're on stage most of the time. Not
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you're off maybe 5 minutes of the whole first act
Right.
or the whole second
Yeah,
act.
intermission.
You're oh, by the way, you're going to play 17 roles.
Yes,
you know?
right.
So I was like, okay.
Oh, good.
And so I did that show, and it just kind of spiraled out of control from there. I got my very first job to help pay for school, although I was fortunate I didn't have to really come up with that much money. I started coaching dance lines and cheerleaders and those kind of things just to make ends meet,
yeah.
which then spiraled into working for other dance studios to teach. So as I came up at YSU, it was like doing all of these different shows, because by the end of the first year, I was like, I'm really tired of this astrophysics thing. I was the only female major.
That's probably about right, yeah.
You know, it's not like
That's not a bad thing. Just,
no,
you're
it's
just
not,
a bunch of nerds,
like
that's all.
that old, but, just, I'm in that weird kind of age range where it still wasn't really totally acceptable. I had some of those old professors who were, basically should have retired 10 years before, who were like, you're a girl, why are you here?
Did they give you a hard time, really?
I actually had a hard time. In my very first physics class, I went in for tutoring.
Right.
Because I was just like, I'm not getting this.
Right.
Apparently my high school physics teacher was for crap. My math teacher was exceptional. I didn't even have to attend Calculus 1. My calc teacher gave us a test the first day and said, do this test. Before I ever passed out a syllabus, do this test. And I finished it and I sat there and I'm like, everybody else is still working. He's like, come here. I'm like, what? He graded it and he goes, how do you get 100 on my test? I'm like, I don't know. Couldn't cheat. I don't even have a book. There's nothing in front of me.
Right.
So apparently I did really well that way, but physics was not great in high school. And I went in for tutoring and he said, you're a major. You should know this. I'm like, if I knew it, I wouldn't be in your class.
Right.
So I convinced one of the guys in my class to go in and ask the very same question. An hour and a half later, he walked out with the answer.
Right.
Where I was dismissed after a few minutes. So it's like, maybe time to get out. And my parents were very much the opposite of everybody else's parents. They were like, go be a theater major. And I'm like, what am I going to do with that? Where, all my friends were like, their parents were like, if you become a theater major,
we're going to kill you.
I mean, I have friends who got kicked out of their house, who were like, go get a full-time job, pay your own way, because we're not going to support this craziness. No. And my parents were very much the opposite. Matter of fact, it was my dad who was like, go do this. And I was like, I can't see a future with that. So I went to TV radio.
Okay.
And they were in the same department. They had the same chair of the department.
How can that be?
Well, it was TV, radio, film, or TV, radio, theater, and music.
Right.
Were all in the same,
that
because
makes sense. Okay, that's
they
fine,
were all in the same department. So I was still always running. I was in the same building.
Mm-hmm.
I was still running into all these people. The only thing that wasn't in that building was the actual TV studio.
Right.
And I just kept taking these classes because now I'm starting to meet people and doing shows. And finally they determined if I stayed an extra 2 quarters, because we were on that horrible quarter system, I could have a whole second degree. Mm-hmm. So I could not only get my BA in TV radio, I could also get a BFA in musical theater.
Okay.
Because I was already taking enough courses.
Sure, right. Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So I ended up staying a 5th year in undergrad, but I walked out with 2 degrees after that. So my last quarter was kind of fun because I didn't have to do a whole lot. I was like, what class have I always wanted to take? Because they paid me money to be here, so I got to take a full load.
Right.
And I was very, very fortunate in that process to find out very early in my very first directing class, this was where I needed to be. Not being on stage was not the be-all, end-all. And I'd had a couple of mentors at that point who were like, because I started choreographing for shows.
Sure.
I was the first student who ever choreographed a main stage production for the university. Because I just kind of bullied my way in and said, look, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Let me do this.
Well, who normally did it?
They always hired somebody.
Hired?
They
Even though they
hired
have this,
somebody.
the department. They
Right.
should have that.
They
talent.
still hired. Well, they were still hired because once they crossed that division, they
Right.
were now being brought in. They were, a guest artist coming
Right.
in, even if they were already employees of the university.
Hmm.
But then there were also several outside choreographers
Right.
for the local, because we had some serious professional dance companies in Youngstown at the time. Not so much anymore. But, at the time, in the late 80s, they could still support that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But so I kind of just bullied my way in there. So, here I am, this senior in college sitting in a production meeting. They didn't even know how to deal with me. I'm like, deal with me the same way you would with any other choreographer. And they did. And after a couple of times of doing that, I had people come to me and go, you just need to make the step. Go take a directing class, do this. And it was a very easy jump. It was like I didn't have to even reprogram my brain. It already worked that way, seeing the big picture as opposed to what I had to do as an actor. And so for my senior project, my basically graduating project, they actually allowed me to direct a full-scale show. So True West was the very first show I ever directed.
One, which you're about to do again,
Which
right?
I'm about to do again at Country Playhouse. So
you don't keep your notes from way back then.
Oh, no. As a matter of fact, when I directed it the first time, I think when you read Shepard's work in your early 20s, I think you see it as all very dark.
Right.
True West, when I directed it the first time, was basically a drama. And it is absolutely not a drama.
Right.
Now, that was what? I was 22 at the time. Yeah. Now I'm 44. Going to be 45. I'm like, now 20-something years later, I see the funny.
Right. Yeah.
It's going to be a whole different production.
Sure. Yeah.
And so it's one of those few shows that I've always wanted to go back and revisit. And fortunately, I get to do that. I had no business directing that at 22. And they should have looked at me and go, are you stupid?
Well, so why do you think they let you do that? I
think I had just proven myself at that point that this was something I really wanted to do.
And no one else wanted to do?
There were other people who asked, but I think by being a choreographer and showing them, and they also knew that I was being hired elsewhere as a choreographer. I was a paid choreographer at 19. Very, very quickly, I switched because I can play that role between the dance teacher and the choreographer, and because I was a dance teacher first, I'm not scared of walking in and working with a bunch of actors who don't necessarily know how to dance. Because I'm like, whatever they need to do, I can teach them how to do. And if I can't teach them how to do it, I'll figure something out. So I think that was the next logical step. And I think they kind of figured, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? It's going to fail.
Yeah, it's college anyway. I mean,
they're like what's the big deal?
Yeah,
what's the big deal? Yeah. They worked out a whole weekend in the schedule so that I had, and it was like the only time, it was a weird time because it was the only time I wasn't actually in a major production, basically from the time I started in there, because I was working on this other show. And it went really well. I expected to have a lot of kind of supervision on it, and I had like literally none. They came in when the technical director came in, when he knew I was doing tech, he said, everything okay? I said, yeah. Because I had even arranged for a whole tech crew of students. It was completely student run. Since that time, because that would have been like 1990 that I directed, December of 90, that I directed that. It took them another 6 years before they allowed another student to do.
Really?
And then they still, to this day, getting the notices, there's very few students that they allow on any kind of production.
Yeah, and that's a shame because it is a great learning opportunity, and you do learn from mistakes. I mean, with the right guidance, and some people need more guidance than others. But
but also seeing, going back and visiting a few directing classes, I'm kind of like, yeah, probably none of this group needs to like handle a full show. If they're having a problem with directing a 7-minute scene, they need to. Step it up a little more. But there is a big conception that if you can be an actor, you can be a director. No, it's two totally separate parts of your brain, and way different organization you have to do.
Yeah.
You're no longer worried about any one individual. You're worried about the whole ensemble.
Right.
Even if it's not an ensemble show.
Right.
You can have one lead and like 8 people who stand back in the back and sway, and you still have to think about it as a group of 9.
Right.
You can't worry about the bits and pieces. You got to worry about the whole thing. But anyway, so I directed True West, and then my sister's high school, my alma mater, but my youngest sister, who's 6 years younger than I am, they'd been doing shows all along, and they decided, we're not going to do a show. It's too much money. They don't make any money.
What?
Okay, so whatever. But the kids are heartbroken. Because they're all now, like, you know, all the kids, you know, they've now done a couple of years worth of shows. And I went in and said, okay, how about I do a fundraiser. I'll come and I'll volunteer my time after school to direct a show for them. Because the choir teacher was like, I'm not going to direct if you're not going to give me a stipend.
Right.
I'm like, I'll volunteer the time. I'll raise the cash to pay for the royalties. We'll get student musicians. It won't cost that much. We'll do Grease, because the cheapest musical on the planet, pretty much, because you can get people to buy in and pull this and that and the other thing from places. They were like, oh, well, we don't think that content is suitable for high schools. I'm like, really? Like, every high school on the planet, even in, you know, 91, I'm like, every high school on the planet has done this musical and will continue to do this musical.
Sure,
They'll do the watered-down version, but
sure,
still,
yeah, right.
You know. And they were like, no. I said, well, how about you just let us borrow the stage then? We'll do everything off and then let us borrow the stage. No. Because that's an insurance nightmare. Fine. So I went out in the community and said, these kids want to do a show. I'm willing to do it. If people are willing to help me get the money, all I need is a space. And in northeastern Ohio, there's still these little things called Grange Halls. They're little meeting rooms.
Okay,
They're like little community centers, like where the farmers used to be. Well, in the little, you know, townships we were in, there were still 2 Grange Halls. And the Fowler Grange Hall said, sure, pay us $50 just so we can say we rented it. It's yours. Matter of fact, do you want it for all the rehearsals and all of that? We only have these 2 dates where we have to do our meetings. We're like, cool. So we did it, and people loved it, and it spiraled into we ended up doing 3 more shows.
Wow. Yeah.
And then off to graduate school I went, because I decided, you know, this is all fine and lovely, but I really wanted to go to film school. So it's like, I'll go do my master's in film.
And you wanted to go where?
Well, I didn't want to go NYU or UCLA or those.
No.
I did not want to go to a school where they handed you a camera and said, we'll see you in 6 weeks. I've always been one of those people, I want to know why I'm doing it. And then if I know the why and I decide to break the rule, I have a justification. I break the rule. I break rules all the time when I direct. You know, don't turn your back to the audience. I'm like, you know what? Sometimes it's really effective. And when I do it, I mean, I'm even doing it in Cinderella. I mean, Christopher turns around and turns his back full up to the audience. Boom.
But there's a reason.
There's a reason for it.
That's right.
Where a lot of directors would be like, well, he can't have his back. Why not?
Yeah.
You see people's backs? People are 3-dimensional beings, whatever. But so for the film, I was like, I want to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't want to do something out of ignorance. I've never been a person to do that. So I went to American University in Washington, D.C., because they have a really good theoretical and history program for film. And unfortunately, we were still shooting on film. There was no digital yet.
Of course not, yeah.
So it's like, I'm like, how did I just keep missing all of these things? I'm just like always right there. You know, I'd like graduate and like 4 years later, everything goes to digital. I'm like, really? Because even in TV, radio, like for radio editing, we're cutting on reel to reel.
Oh, yeah, I've done reel to reel.
You know,
splicing,
like,
just you get this right.
Going,
yes,
you know,
yes,
take
I've been there,
here's
done
the
that.
newscast and turn it into Mary Had a Little Lamb. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was really great for the film program because that touch of the film.
Yeah.
There's nothing better. I mean, until you realize you've cut the wrong frame, there's
that's
nothing better.
Oh crap moment.
That's like, oh, guess what? I'm going to do a jump cut here, and then I'm going to add 6 more jump cuts later, so this one doesn't look out of place. Oh, yeah, I did that on purpose. You know, and that's kind of thing. So, you know, that was interesting, and I really found that when I was in film school, everybody called me that theater person. Because they said, you're thinking very theatrically. And all of my projects and everything were very theatrical.
Yeah, but you've had the TV. You have the TV training.
Right. So, I mean, but, they just kept focusing on this theater thing because my pieces didn't look like other people's pieces. They weren't avant-garde like some of the crazy guys from Greece and Italy, and the one guy from somewhere in what used to be Russia. I don't remember which place, but where these guys are like edgy and all of this. Mine were very almost music video-ish. They were very theatrical and had a lot of connection to things.
How interesting. And
then what was so funny about that is literally right after I graduated, Baz Luhrmann comes out with Moulin Rouge. And I'm like, really? Theatrical? You guys beat this out of me and look what he just, there's nothing that's more kind of over the top crazy, as far as that goes. But while I was there, I was that theater person. Mm-hmm. And I even auditioned for shows there. Never could get cast. And it turns out I was like, people would come up to me going, how are you not cast in this show? And then when I would go see the shows, I was like, dodge that bullet.
So did you ever figure out why? What was the deal?
Because I actually auditioned for them to be a choreographer. Because they wanted me to audition to be a choreographer. They didn't want to look at my resume. Right. Even though in the community theaters, and I'm in Washington, D.C. Right. So there's professional theater and there's a lot of community theater. Sure. And there's some that are basically, in people's garages and stuff like that. Sure. It's like, but I mean, I was getting hired off my resume because I already had, at 23 years old, I already had 5 shows directing and, umpteen shows as choreographer.
Absolutely right.
I actually got hired to direct Quilters outside of Bethesda, Maryland. I ended up having to turn it down because it ended up jumping right on top of when my final thesis was going to be due. When they gave me, because you always have the same day. And so literally they called me and said, we want you to direct this. And the next day I had to call them back and say, I'm so sorry. Right. It's the only time I've ever turned down a directing gig like that. But it was like, college degree, fun play to do, So I was like, all right. But for the university, I had to audition, and they just kept saying, we don't think you're ready for us. And I'm like, I'm thinking I probably know more than you do, which is probably the problem. I can't ever prove that, and that's, one of those things. But when I would go see the shows, because I would always know people that were in them, so I would go be supportive and go see the show.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you look at it and you go, that's your college show? Wow, that's really not good. I mean, the costuming was terrible, the tech was terrible, the acting was terrible, the directing was terrible. It looked like bad middle school. Everybody walking around so their back never turned to the audience. And, I basically have to back away. Really? Right. No. We're thoroughly in the days of Stanislavski's system. Let's have some naturalism on stage. So I'm not exactly sure, but they just kept pushing me away. They were like, you're a graduate student. I'm like, okay, so, there's all the suppositions when you're kind of like, and I finally just stopped auditioning when I saw the quality of the show anyway. Right. But I was like, well, maybe I can help when they put up the notice for choreographers. I was like, maybe I can help make this better. Sure. And they were like, no, you're not ready for us. I'm like, really? My resume would prove otherwise,
Well, it's true. Almost any, community. They have their little pond. And they didn't want you to play in their pond. Right?
Exactly. That's so it was fine. Because I was getting hired elsewhere, so I'm like, I don't really need this little university. I'll go do this community theater piece over here where they're going to pay me, and I'm actually going to, they're going to give me technical support. They're going to do all this stuff. And then my stint in Washington, D.C. basically came to an end after I graduated with my master's in film, and it basically came out as a theoretician. Did very little I did not do a production. I actually wrote a master's thesis as opposed to doing
So we're talking about theory. What are we talking about? We're talking about technique. We're talking
everything from technique to history to analytical criticism. Right. Like, writing those...
You mean like being a critic?
Not even being a critic, but being a scholarly critic, where you literally could take a
write
film,
articles?
Write an article, or even write a book. I mean, that's really what it was geared to. I mean, my master's thesis was on Disney animation, and it's really hard to find an area that hasn't been covered, but I found one at the point where I'm like, what is the deal with the absence of parents in the Disney films? Well, it goes back to fairy tales and all of those things, and then there were connections because I looked at Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, and Aladdin because those were the three most current. and looked at the differences and had to go back and pull out, okay, what happens when the lead character is male versus when the lead character is female, and blah, 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 blah. It's not a very good master's thesis, because at some point I said, I just need the piece of paper that has my name on it.
Most of us do. We just want the piece of paper. Let me out of here, please.
They're like, well, we can't give you anything more than a B+ on your master's thesis.
I don't care.
Rock on.
Good. Let's get it. I'm out of here.
You know, all I need is a B- to get out of here and get the paper and start paying back student loans.
Right.
But then I said, if I'm just that theater person, let me go back to theater. So I applied at University of Maryland for their PhD program. Mm-hmm. And I made it very clear to them I was not looking to have a TA position.
Right.
I was not looking for money for them. I just wanted acceptance. Because I was working for a company called Spaceworks, which was in Rockville, Maryland. And this is back in the day when AOL was AOL. There was no AOL 2 point whatever.
Right.
Delphi was out there.
It's actually worth something. Yeah.
CompuServe.
Yes,
you know,
I remember those.
Those were our 3 big competitors because we were a proprietary online system. We had people like WordPerfect and Panasonic and Sony as customers, so that you could have that loaded on your computer, log on via that lovely little modem that people had to make sure was turned on.
Get the tone.
I
got tone, all right.
You know, well, try &7, you know. You know, I think it was &MMM was one of the ones where like, add this in there, see if that'll connect you. Yeah. So I was making like really good money. I didn't want to give up that job just to go back to school. So for the first time ever, they accepted 3 PhD candidates because they didn't have to give me any money.
Right.
So I was like, cool, rock on. And did several semesters there, auditioned for a show there. They were like, well, you're really not an actor. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. Like, I'm directing anyway, so do I really care? I'm just trying to find a way to get in and do some other things. Right. And they were like, well, our PhD candidate should be focused on theory. And it's like, whatever. And went through 3 semesters there and said, I'm not enjoying this. And Spaceworks was bought out by a group of venture capitalists. Mm-hmm. And the one day they came to me and said, now tomorrow morning, do you have anything scheduled in the training room? I'm like, no. They're like, well, we're going to have 30 people in there tomorrow morning at 9:15 in the morning. And I need you to not reveal the names of those 30 people who are going to be pulled in that room. I was like, what? And they said, by the way, we're also going to bring you a list, and you're going to disable all of their security protocols while they're in that room. Because it was the only room outside of the office. You had to go across the hall. Sounds like layoffs, yeah. Typical. Yeah, so it was. They riffed a third of the company. As I was sitting there looking into, because the classroom had a glass window between my office and the training room, and I'm like, head down, doing it. I was like, I've had enough of Washington D.C. 5 years in Washington D.C. is a long time if you don't work for the federal government. Yeah. And by the time I was getting ready to face the second inauguration, where like the city just basically implodes, you can't get anywhere, you can't do anything, you're like, okay, let's see, this seems like a good weekend or a good week to go back and visit my parents in Ohio. Sure, yep. So I picked up and moved here to Houston. I knew a couple of people who were living here and said, let me come down here.
Houston, of all places.
I had come to visit the August before. Right. And people were like, you're going to Houston in August? Well, what was so funny about when I was here that year, it was cooler here in Houston than it was in Washington, D.C. The entire 7 days I was here, didn't get over 95 degrees here. It was 104 in D.C.
It happens, but it's unusual.
Well, and D.C. is sitting on a swamp. It's all wetlands. Right. That's all what
the
wall is.
Yeah, well.
You know, so it was like, phew, I dodged that bullet. Because people are like, are you crazy? You're going to Texas in August? I was like, whatever. So I kind of knew, and growing up where there was lots and lots of snow all the time, I'm like, let's just move to Houston. It'd be the first time I ever moved anywhere where I actually knew people. Hmm. So a couple of my college buddies were here. We all went different directions, and we all ended up in
same place anyway. Yeah.
So came down here and immediately started sending out my resume to theaters, having no idea that Houston Community Theater is a completely different animal than anywhere else I had ever worked.
Each locale, and I say locale, does have its own character, and you have to get used to that.
It was like, wow, I'm like, nobody's called me? Oh my God. And I'm like calling and going to visit the theater and trying to talk to artistic directors, and they're like, oh, well, we picked the directors from da-da-da-da. I was like, okay. And so I was like, well, let me do something. And my buddies were teaching high school in Humboldt, and they're like, can you give us a workshop? these kids don't have any kind of movement.
Right.
And the dance teacher here does not want to work with us, so can you come in and do a workshop? I was like, sure. So we pulled together a workshop, did it after school one day, and then their friend at Kingwood High School found out that I didn't. They're like, well, you come do it for us. I was like, sure. And the more of those I started doing, then people were like, hey, we want to do this all the time.
Right.
These kids need to know this stuff.
Right.
And then I got hired as a choreographer for a small little touring company, kind of like Glee before there was Glee.
Right.
Back before it was cool to do that. You were a complete nerd to do
Right.
that kind of stuff. And they were like, we need somebody who could direct and choreograph and all that stuff. So I did that. And between the workshops and that, people were like, hey, we need this. So I opened up Performing Arts Education Center at Kingwood while I was still working the job that had got me here.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a contract position. So I was like, I can make my own hours.
Right.
And do whatever I want. And ran that for nearly 10 years. That's a really hard road to do.
I mean,
that's 24/7, 365.
Right.
You don't, people were like, oh, it's winter break, you get a break. I'm like, no, because the All That Jazz touring group still has 3 more bookings. I have to get set up for the master play that we're doing at the end of the year. So my only time when I can like tear up the studio and get stuff ready when I don't have class is those 3 weeks that we have off. So no, I don't really have time off. I usually give myself Christmas Day off. But other than that, But in the summer, it was still go. Because I did dance theater and musical theater there, which was probably the best training ground to ever be in. And my directing got a whole lot better because suddenly when you've got to figure out how do you explain the idea of line analysis to a second grader. Mm-hmm. And because I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. These kids are not just going to get up there and say these lines. They're going to have to understand why. And people used to get really irritated with me when they would say, well, my kindergartner really wants to be an actor. Well, fine, wait till they're in second grade. Because once they can read and read at a certain level, then I can hand them a line of dialogue and they can figure it out. If I have to tell them what it says, all they're doing is parroting what I'm saying. Right. They're doing imitation. They're not making choices. So working with the kids, and I would work with second graders all the way up through adults. And I think that really made everything crystal clear as far as trying to come up and formulate how I wanted actors trained. Mm-hmm. Some part of me is very Stanislavskian. I am completely not method in the way I perform on stage. Right. I'm like, it's called acting. Turn it on, turn it off. I don't need to be, if I need to be out of breath, I don't need to run around the building to be out of breath. It's turn it on, turn it off. Right. Like the old story about Dustin Hoffman doing that and Death of a Salesman. And, it's like, no.
Laurence Olivier.
Laurence Olivier going,
that's right.
It's acting. It's acting. And those kind of things. And then keeping up with the dance, which is one thing I do miss now with not doing it anymore. But I don't think my body misses it so much. I miss it mentally.
Well, it's unfortunate. You really have a really short time period that you can physically do it. You may want to do it.
Right. Well, and I kind of, got out at the right time with how the economy was going. I mean, my accountant to this day is mad at me. He's like, you don't close a business when you have 130% growth every year. It's like, I do. Because I need to be done.
Well, yeah.
Because I finally got what I felt was back on track for me, which was teaching at the college and university level. And I was fortunate that HCC had a position. It wasn't the position I had initially applied for. I actually applied for 3 positions at different community colleges. Because without a PhD, it's almost impossible to get into the university circuit. But
really?
Yeah, they really want the PhDs.
Even though you can be ABD, they don't care.
They don't care.
You can be lecturer or whatever. No.
They don't care. And they look at no professional credits. It's like, because I have more professional credits than some other people.
But it doesn't
matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And HCC doesn't care about that as far as paying me. Right. But they looked at it and were like, okay, because I know the 3 people who it came down to finalists, and I was basically the only generalist. I can do the sets, I can do the lights, I can do the costuming, I can do the sound, I can do the directing, I can do the film and the theater and all of that stuff. Which
is important because a lot of people that seem to graduate now with theater degrees, it doesn't seem like they are generalists.
No, and going to YSU was the best thing. I mean, I think I tried to calculate it last night. I was out with a friend of mine that we came out of the same program, and we were trying to calculate. We can't recall any year of the 5 years I was there that we had more than 18 theater majors. And that encompassed everybody, whether you're BA or BFA.
Right.
And so you had to learn everything.
Right.
I mean, if you weren't in the show, you were working the show.
Right.
There basically wasn't an option.
Right.
And it wasn't, you didn't even just necessarily do it for grade. I worked, I don't know how many shows that I got nothing out of except the experience of working it.
Right.
I mean, I worked costume mistress for the opera 1 year simply because I'd never done the position. Mm-hmm. I didn't get a practicum hour. I didn't get anything. Right. I just gave up my own time to do it because
they needed you, right? So yeah,
I've never done this.
Right.
Let me do it.
Right.
I don't like doing it.
Well, that's important too. Yeah.
But it was also I was doing it for the opera students, so that's a whole different can of worms anyway, because they don't come up with the same attitude towards the tech staff that actors should have. You know?
Okay. Well,
it was very much like, here, take this. You know, it's like, excuse me? No. You say pleases and thank yous to your tech crew because, you know, I don't necessarily have to zipper up that dress.
I can make things happen, you know. Yeah.
Oops. Oh. The best thing I ever learned about that was when I was like, that would have been my 4th year at YSU. My mom owned her own dance supply store because she got tired of driving to Cleveland or Pittsburgh, which was an hour and 15 minutes either way.
Right.
So she just said, fine, bow to the forces. I got to outfit my own kids. Mm-hmm. And then we'll outfit everybody else.
Got a guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what is that? She decided she wanted to do a dance workshop for all the kids in the area because nothing ever came to Youngstown. You had to go to Cleveland or Pittsburgh. So she contacted a few of her friends in the business and got 2 really great New York dance teachers / choreographers to come in. And she's like, we need a headliner. And she asked me, you know, who would it be for a headliner? And I looked at her and said, there's only one option. She said, who? I said, Gregory Hines. She said, okay. 14 phone calls later, Gregory Hines is now on his way to Youngstown to do a workshop. Yeah. And it was really interesting picking him up at the airport, the whole bit, because he has to have, you know, he's a star, so you have all of these parameters and everything. Yes. And we set him up at the best hotel in Youngstown, one of those really quaint, you know, even back in the day, $300 a night.
Oh, gracious.
You know,
yeah, right.
You're talking 1989. So
that's a lot. Yes, yeah, right.
You know, really, because he needed a suite and the whole business. And they had a private dining room, so we rented the dining room and invited him to come. He's like, I'll probably just eat in my room. We're like, that's cool. Everybody else, you know, the folks from New York and my family and I were all sitting down there. We heard knock, knock, knock on the door. And he's like, is there room for one more? So he came in and plopped himself down next to me. Best experience just talking to somebody of that kind of caliber. Mm-hmm. And he was like, well, what show were you working on? Da, 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 da. And I had just got done with the opera.
Right.
And I said, well, now I'm working on this. And he was like, well, what was that experience like being backstage? And I told him, I said, it wasn't, you know, great. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, here's a story for you. He said, you know, my brother Maurice and I came up in the vaudeville circuit, the end of the vaudeville circuit. I'm like, yeah. Because I had done every bit of research on Gregory Hines I could possibly do. I needed to know everything.
Right.
And he said, one day he said, because I can't remember if I was 5 or 6, but I came off stage and you hear, you know, encore, encore, encore. Right. And he said, I turned and looked at the technician and said, you need to put my drum set on stage. He said, I got lifted off the ground. And it wasn't by the technician, it was by his father, who served as their agent and manager.
Really? Right.
Literally picked him off the ground by his back of his shirt.
Right.
Said, don't you ever. These people are here to help you.
Right.
And they can make things go really bad for you. You need to go apologize to this man and make sure you never behave that way again. He said, I did it. Mm-hmm. And he said, from that time on, I have always said pleases and thank yous to those people who work backstage. He said, because none of us have anything if it's not them.
Right.
He said, I learned that. He said, I tell that story because I'll tell that story at the workshop. I said, rock on. Mm-hmm. And because it kind of made me feel validated, because we were always told in the theater program, you need to respect those people who are, you know, who are working for you.
Right.
and you better be nice, and because lights get turned off, or costumes get unzipped, or props get moved.
Yeah,
there's lots of ways they can mess you up.
They can really mess you with you if they want to. Yes, they could. Yeah.
Because they can go, not my deal.
Right.
I turned the lights off too fast. Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. Curtains get dropped, whatever. Yeah. But that was a really great experience because he was very much like, actors need to understand they can't do their job without all the technicians,
right,
all the directors, all the producers, all the ushers, all the, this, that, and the other thing.
Well, that's interesting because that lesson gets lost not just on community theater, but other professionals.
Exactly.
That come through here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And,
we can't wait for them to be gone quick enough.
and somebody at that caliber at that time,
right.
And it was before he was diagnosed with cancer and all of that. So, he was working a lot. And, for him, number one, to take out the time to come do this little dance workshop, and it was just great to meet anyway.
So why did he do this? Yeah.
He was like, he said he actually looked at the map to find out where it was and kind of what the socioeconomic status of the place was. We're not, it's the Rust Belt.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he was like, and he had, the last workshop he had done was like 10 years before that, and it was strictly for quote unquote semi-professionals. Mm-hmm. And for this one, we were clear down to like 7-year-olds.
Right.
And then there was a master class later. But he was like, you know what? Nobody ever did this for me. He said, I learned to dance by stealing steps.
Right.
That's what you did.
Sure.
Nobody ever came to me and said, so if I can give them some steps to steal, awesome. He had a great time. I had a great time getting to know him. And it was for 2 days, I was buds with Gregory Hines. Because at that point, I was not a great tap dancer. I hadn't tapped. Tap was the last thing I came to. Mm-hmm. And he was like, how come you're not taking my master class? I'm like, because I can't keep up. No. And so he completely embarrassed me the entire time, because the master class we did in front of everybody. Right. And so I'm standing backstage and I'm kind of watching, and he's like, just get out here. He's like dragging me on the stage, and I'm going, really? No, this is not cool. This is not cool. My mom's claim to fame is like she had her hands inside Gregory's dance bag because he was there. He goes, I hate to ask this. He goes, I want my other pair of shoes. And she's like, I'll go. He's like, okay, cool. They're the ones in like, he's like, they're in the little part. So she went into his dance bag and got out the shoes. And it was really fun. But to have a professional like that who really... He said thank you. I literally witnessed him say thank you to security guards that were there, because we had to have additional security.
It was a class act.
And it was a union house, so we couldn't touch anything that wasn't, anything on the stage area or any of that. And he said thank you to all those people, and I was like, that's the way to be. And I try to do that as much as possible. I don't always do as much as I should.
Well, it's interesting, because we had that story of Debbie Reynolds when she came here to the Crighton. She said, what do you need doing? You need me to vacuum? You need me, whatever, cleaned up. You just got in there. Right. And, there's no pretension whatsoever. And then there are others that come in.
And you're like,
don't let the door hit you on the way out.
And you kind of wonder how they get to be to that caliber with that kind of attitude. Because you think at some point somebody would pull them up short. But I guess nobody ever does.
You don't know. You don't know. And I guess... maybe you have your entourage. Maybe they protect you from a lot of things, and so you know how it is. You've worked backstage, obviously, and you've been in front of the stage. And people that haven't worked backstage have no idea all the things that have to happen.
Right.
I mean, they go like say, "Yeah, it was a good show. Yeah, I didn't like the set," or "Yeah, the acting was okay," or "Oh man, I just love the music." But they don't have a clue everything that can happen, or things that you cover. You know?
Oh yeah, you didn't know that fell over 2 seconds before we walked on, or that.
And sometimes you do.
It's like, oh, Cinderella's dress zipper broke. So how do we fix this? And literally safety pinning her in.
Well, I noticed that because when we were videoing that night, with permission of R&H, of course.
Right.
I noticed that the fairy godmother is behind Cinderella. And she hadn't been there before. Right. And I said, must be fixing something. But that's okay. Yep. It just made it look natural and just go with it.
But I mean, literally, when the it must have been Sunday. Yeah, it was the Sunday matinee that the zipper just broke. Yeah. The teeth just wouldn't hold anymore. Mm-hmm. I think it's, you have these fancy dresses. They're meant to be worn once. Right. If you're lucky as a girl, twice. Right. They're not meant to, like, stand up to what we're doing to this poor dress. And... everybody's freaking out, and I'm like, where's the safety pins? Mm-hmm. give me the safety pins. I'm like, where's the shawl?
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly she's got a whole back treatment. People are like, you can't even tell. I'm like, you just got to do what you got to do. You can't panic. You can't go on. I mean, costume malfunctions are the least of the worries. I mean, literally when I did Quilters, my very first show at the university, we got to the second weekend, Friday night, and we all showed up early for whatever reason.
Right.
And we're like, Susan's not here. I'm sure there was some reason why we agreed we would all be there early. I don't remember.
Right.
In hindsight, I don't remember why. And we're like, Susan's not here. That's weird. And there's no cell phones.
Right. No.
So you're like, okay. We're like, well, she'll just be here. Maybe she forgot.
Sure.
Suddenly the director, tap, tap, tap on the door. He's like, are you all dressed? Yeah. Come on in. And he's like, we have a problem. I'm like, what? He's like, Susan's not coming. We're like, what?
Why not?
She lived on one of the few dorms on campus. Because we were pretty much a commuter school.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And she slipped on the top of the stairs, fell down a flight of stairs, and cracked her head into the old wrought iron steam radiator thing on landing. Literally cracked her head into this cast iron piece. And he had talked to her in the hospital because she finally convinced somebody at the hospital she needed to make a phone call. And she needed to make a phone call now.
Right.
And because it's like 7:15 and we're going up at 8.
Oh my goodness!
And
dear.
Apparently she was having a hissy fit at the hospital, going, "No, you don't understand. I have to go."
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm like, no, you have swelling in your brain. You're not going anywhere. So he comes in. He says, "I don't know what should we do." He said, "What I want to do." He said, "I'm gonna leave it up to you guys." He said, "What I want to do is, I think most of you know her parts, right?" And I'm like, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
You pretty much can recite everybody.
Sure.
So when you're on stage that much, you just know everybody's parts. And you're already playing 12, 15, 17 characters.
Well, that's another part.
You know, you're like, whatever.
Yeah.
We're like, we at least can know it well enough to get through it.
Right.
He was like, this one whole speech we can just dump. He said, I just want to reblock it. Let's go on. He said, but if you really are anti that, he said, because this is not a normal situation, we'll cancel the show for tonight. We're like, aren't there people already out in the lobby? He's like, yeah. We're like, we'll redo the show. And we went downstairs to the Black Box Theater and started working through the show. We're like, let's not worry about the dance numbers. I was dance captain for the show. It's like, who cares? You're going to make the announcement. She's not here. That we're covering. So who cares if something's lost?
They'll understand, right?
We're not worried about that. We just want to worry about the content. And they made the announcement at 7:45 and then again at 8 o'clock about we had an actress and we were doing. We didn't start the show until 8:40. Not a single audience member left. I think they probably want to see the train wreck. Right.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's interesting too.
You know, and they were like, okay, but nobody left. Every ticket that was sold had a butt in it. You know, so it was like, okay. And that was a great learning experience because he never panicked. He was like, here's what I want to do, but if you're not going to, if you're going to freak out, because he's got 6 girls sitting in front of, like there's no telling what we're going to do or say. And then 3 years later, we had the same thing happen. I was doing costumes for Is There Life After High School. Same director. Goes to the cast. Dave's been in a car accident. We're like, seriously? I'm like, well, I can't do his part because his part is very male, so there's no. I'm like, I would have known the show. He's like, we can work it out, and everybody's freaking out. I'm like, dude, this is the second time this has happened to him in 3 years. I don't know how many other times it's happened to him, but I can tell you firsthand, second time in 3 years, he's not going to panic. Just work through it. So it's like, that's the one lesson I took from him as a director was just don't panic, just make it work. It'll all work out in the end. It'll be fine.
Well, one way or the other, sometimes better than other, but at times,
you just, so like losing actors for shows doesn't panic me. I'm like, okay, I'll find somebody. May not be my first or second choice, but there's, you are replaceable. Whether you quit or we fire you, you are replaceable. You just don't panic about things like that. You try not to. And I'm a panicker by nature, but something kicks in the middle of a performance. If there's a problem on performance day, you just chill out.
I think it helps that you're a doer, and I think it's an important part. We were talking, about how you've worked all the different roles in theater, but especially in community theater, you need doers. you don't. You know, he's like, I don't know how to do that. Well, learn.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
learn.
Exactly.
You know, take some initiative. And it's not just theater. It seems to be our society in general. People don't like to take initiative, and sometimes they even get dinged for taking the initiative.
Yeah. I kind of get that at HCC because I'm like, I just do it.
Right. Don't ask permission.
I just
it
do
needs
it.
to be done. Somebody do
it's
it.
better. It's better to ask for forgiveness later. And a lot of times I'm in there going, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know," and it's like, but ultimately it had to be done anyway. So
Right. So
you just kind of go, how much of a ding am I going to take by stepping up and doing something? Because if I didn't do it, I'm going to get a bigger ding.
Right.
It's good. It's going to happen one way or the other.
Right.
But yeah, there's.
So were you always this way, the doer, or is it because of the business where you definitely have to do everything? Things have to happen.
Oh, I am a type.
Or is that from the very beginning? Like I said, when you were small and you were doing shows and you learned things have to get done. Somebody has to do it.
Well, literally in 3rd grade, working on Wizard of Oz, because you had to be at least in 4th grade to be in the show.
Right.
So 3rd grade, you could be in the chorus, which was just a group of kids sitting over to the side, not in costume, just you sang all the backup chorus stuff. And I went to the director, who was our music teacher, and said, I really want to do more. This is really exciting. I really like this. And she's like, well, why don't you help design the programs?
Okay.
Get with the art teacher. So my best friend, Shelly Manson, and I went over to the art teacher and said, we want to do this. She helped us design the programs, lay them all out. And then once we designed them and had them all done, then the music teacher was like, why don't you guys be ushers for the show? We were like, we can do that. So my first foray really into theater was being an usher, but it was like, I have to do something, but I am such a type A personality. I always tell my students when I talk about, the whole actor-director relationship, I'm like, actors need to have some ego. They need to have some ego because you're setting yourself up for success or failure. Right. So you need to have a little bit of ego, but you also need to know how to check that ego. There are times when you need to turn that off. Right. Yeah. But if you don't have a little bit of ego, you're never going to step foot in to do the audition. Right. Because you've got to think you're at least better than those people you're walking in with. Right. You may be
well, at least you have the guts to get up there and put some of yourself out there. So.
Right. So I said, but, the biggest ego in the room is always the director. And I said, and that ego doesn't ever shut off. And they're like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah, I'm perfect. I always laugh and say, I don't have an ego problem. I know I have an ego, therefore there's no problem.
That's not a problem. So.
But I'm very much a control freak. And it's hard for me when I'm not the boss to deal with stuff because I'm like, I can see what needs to be done. And I think I always have had a director's brain.
So this is even from the beginning?
From little kid. Where I could see...
Is your mom like that, or no?
Oh, absolutely.
So you get it from your mom?
Apple tree, yeah.
We can blame your mom? Yeah. You saw your mom say, oh, this is how I'm supposed to be. No, without any words. Yeah, just by example.
And it's like, most people are afraid of conflict and controversy, and I'm like, if I know I'm right, there's no conflict, because I'm just right. And I'm a pit bull when it comes to, if I know I'm right. Yeah. And in particular, when I get associated with a cast or like my students, whether they're in my class or on a show like this, if there's something that needs to be done and I see that I can't physically do it for whatever reason, I will just grit my teeth and just bully my way until it gets done. Because I'm protecting those people. I become very much the mother hen.
Sure, yeah.
Only kind of probably the evil stepmother as opposed to like the lovey-dovey, oh, it's okay, honey, because I'm not one of those touchy-feely directors. I'm not like, well, what are you feeling now? I don't care. What is your character feeling is what I care about. I don't care. Right. You as the actor, get over it. Right. Leave the baggage at the door. Right. Yeah. And some directors or some actors really like that because I'm very specific and they know what to expect and they know what I want. And it's not going to be let's talk about our feelings day. And, there's no Meisner in my approach. There's no, let's just move around. No, let's get down to brass tacks, get this done. Do what I say, and you'll get the reaction we need. Yeah. Lewis's prime example in Cinderella, I've worked with him one other time before on a little show called Theater Trip, very avant-garde little piece. Nothing on the stage except one box. Right. Actors all in black. Right. Spent the first 35 pages of the script on stage by himself.
Mm-hmm.
The first 3.5 minutes of that in silence.
Wow. Doing what? Pantomime?
Very, very little, actually. Actually doing very little. The first 30 seconds of the piece, he lies flat on his back on stage. And then slowly wakes up because he's a character. He's just
Right.
man. He's the character the playwright's written.
Right.
So he can't do anything until the playwright actually gets him to the place to do something. So he has to go through this whole thing of self-discovery.
Right.
Which was really hard for any actor to do. But Lewis kind of fought me the whole time. I'm like, just trust me. You're just going to have to do it. Mm. And he was an actor who's like, lots of gestures. And I'm like, stop. Mm. Put your hands at your side. Get them out of your pocket. Just let them hang there and talk. But I'm not doing anything. Exactly. So I'd already gone through that process with Lewis. So when we get to, doing pieces of Cinderella, especially like The Loneliness of Evening, they're in the ball when after he comes out of that crazy dance, and then he goes into just this lament about where's this girl. Right. And I just looked at him and said, walk down center and sing. Hmm. And everybody around me, actors, producer, everybody's like, he's not doing anything. I'm like, exactly. And they're like, but he's got to do something. No, he doesn't have to do anything. And the way the audience reacts is exactly the way they need to react. Right. Let him do his thing. Right. Sometimes less for an actor is more. Right. For him to be able to stand there in a pool of light and sing out to the audience so that every little girl is going, oh, he's singing about me. And every grandma's going, oh, man. Right. I'm like, that's what you need. Right. And so I'm very much do what I ask you to do, and it will all come out. Little things. The slipper in Chris's middle in the end scene, and they're trying to find the slipper. Right. April was like, are you sure? Shouldn't I be nice and handsome? No! Whap it at him. Every night it's gotten a laugh. I'm like, see? Just do it. I actually do know what I'm talking about. But, some actors work really well with that. Others are like, I will never work with you ever again. They say that they don't like the structure. They want to, and I'm like, you have lots of time to explore. When I'm doing those blocking rehearsals, and when we're going through and doing the transitional rehearsals before we really get to the acting rehearsal, that's your time to explore. You may come up with stuff I don't like. I'll tell you I don't like it. You may come up with stuff that I go, if you're going to do that, then let's do it all the way. I always call those happy accidents, where an actor does something and they're not even sure where it came from, and you're like, wait, hold up. Okay, that works there, but let's twist this way.
Well, it's a little about the Ron Howard school of film. He goes in with a base plan, sees something better, he goes with it. Right.
And I think that's one thing where you really check where a director, they need that ego, because you have to be right. Even if you are absolutely wrong in rehearsal, you have to be right. And you have to tell everybody, I'm right. You can't not be right. Because if you come in there and go, I'm not sure, then the cast will never, ever trust you. But you also have to be able to go, when you realize you're totally wrong, go, that was crap. That was total crap. So here's how we're going to fix it. Right. And people are okay with that because you're decisive about it. Right. But I think that's one thing as a director you have to be able to do, is be able to go look at your own work and go, that's not my best. What did I do wrong? Like, I plot everything out in these weird little scribbly notes in a script. And then people are like, you go through the blocking rehearsal and you don't even look at them. I'm like, I don't need to, because I already did the work. It's there. Those are just there if I can't remember something. Right. And half the time I'll change it as I go. Because I call it Zen blocking or Zen directing, where all of a sudden I just be like, my body just goes. It's like, it's like, oh no, this is the way it should go. I don't care what I've blocked out on paper.
Well, right, yeah.
As soon as you get the people up there, it's a whole different thing.
Well, absolutely,
and most people would never know when I do it that it's not what is written in my notes. Yeah. Right. They're like, are you coming up with this off the top of your head? I'm like, no, it's all planned. Right. It may not look planned to you, because it may be looking like I'm going, okay, and go here. And then I go, okay, here. But I think that's one of the things. And I think you have to have the organization to do that. You have to be able to pre-plan.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
You have to be able to pre-plan. And with Cinderella, fortunately, I had some time to do that. Because normally when I directed HCC, we have an open audition where I have 2 or 3 plays. Right. because I don't know who's going to show up.
Right.
At a community college, every semester, it's a whole new crop of kids.
That's
usually.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you get a few that'll stay there for the 2 years and get their degree, but there's in today's economy, there's a whole lot of people who come for one semester, pick up whatever class they need to help, escalate for whatever employment they do have, or they stay for just a year and then transfer out. So I never know who or what I'm going to have.
Sure.
So my prep time on shows is like, oh, let's see, I had 5 guys audition, so guess what? We're going to throw out the all-girls script.
But you have open auditions, right? I mean, people from the community can, anybody
can show up. You find out when
but
the auditions are. Yeah.
Good.
Well, so I never know, but it's like, they're like, well, what play are you doing? I'm like, I'll determine this based on the audition. So it's like that. I think that's been a really good kickstart for me because I have to be able to go from 0 to 90 in a weekend, literally.
Right.
Because we'll go from auditions on Tuesday, Wednesday, casting by Friday morning, and Monday starts rehearsal. And it's like, the only time I've had to work with the script is that weekend.
Right.
To really sit down and go, here's how I do this show. So it's a different process, and it doesn't always work for everybody. It doesn't work for every play really well that way. I have gotten caught, coming up short going, oh, I didn't realize that I have to be able to do this.
Right.
Yikes. But it's good when you do have prep time, then it's like, oh, this is easy. Now all I gotta do is find the actors. And hope that they pay attention and because the first rehearsal, I always just say, just trust me. I know you don't know me from anybody, but since you don't know me at all, just go, I trust you. And make that choice, and life will be happy, and hopefully we'll have a good show. And knock on wood, I usually can, get a show that I'm happy with. No director's ever going to get 100% of what they want. Ever.
No.
Ever. My thing is if I can get over 80%, I go, success. Because if you can even come close to 90%, you've now hit it out of the park. Because if you somehow, God's green earth can come up with better than 90% of what you had in your head, the gods have been smiling on you.
Oh, it's amazing. The more you read books about the film, theater, whatever, you realize that we're all in the same boat. It doesn't matter at what level, how big your budget is.
No.
You never get exactly what you want.
No.
And even then, I think of George Lucas. He still goes back to recut Star Wars because he's not happy with what he has. In fact, and you know it too, because if you've seen the originals and you go back, that scene wasn't in there. Where that actor was in the scene, he's been removed. What? He's been replaced in this version. What?
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm a big Star Wars nerd. That's why I went to film school. So. But and there's basically infinite money and infinite resources.
And he still doesn't get exactly what he wants.
Right. He's like, go back, and it's like, stop messing with it. It was fine the first time, leave it alone. But that's the kind of thing. And I think with Cinderella we were actually in a really good spot. We were very fortunate with the actors.
Yeah.
Wow. To be able to go, oh, look, I have actual actors who can sing and act. Because you just never know when you do a musical. Are you going to get the singers who can't read a line of dialogue but sound real pretty?
That's right.
Or do you have the actors who kind of sort of sing, and then people are going,
Right.
But fortunately for the leads, I mean, I couldn't be happier with Lewis and
Kelly. Oh, they're excellent. They're together.
And their chemistry on stage works.
Oh, yes.
And it's like, and that took very little from me to get that.
Right.
Because they were already friends, which already jump-started it.
They've worked together before, that helps.
So you can kind of go, okay, take this chemistry and shunt it off this way.
But even still, we can see a progression in their interactions, even their emoting.
Yeah.
Through the performances, different. It has developed over time.
It has definitely, and they've actually gotten way more comfortable with, because I purposely tried to, I didn't direct this show as a musical. I approached it the same way I would a straight show. Because even the numbers aren't really, they're not choreographed. They're directed.
Right.
And that was real important to me. I'm like, this is not, because there's so much underscoring in the show. If I do it like a musical, it's going to be all cheesy and over the top. Right. And it's already, mean, it's
Which
already
is usually typical music.
Cinderella.
Right, yeah,
It's already
come on.
Cinderella.
That's right, yeah. Duh.
So it's like, you don't get much more schmaltzy anyway. Like, oh, look, oh, cute. Oh. We're all standing backstage going, oh, I have found you. And we're all like, love schmub,
Yeah.
At this point, after spending this much time with it, we're all kind of
Right.
like, love, romance, whatever. That's all fake,
Yeah.
But to put them in the awkward situation of, really making those two characters of Cinderella and Chris really have that awkwardness when you first meet somebody and not, we have to know it's love at first sight, but we don't say the right thing, we don't do the right thing. It's like, I don't know, and Lewis in particular has really finally found that through the performances. I think it was
he said he had a hard time. He had a hard time.
Yeah, it was like, because I was like, you gotta be nervous, dude.
Yeah.
Lean in and, I can't kiss her. You gotta get out of there.
Right.
I was like, imagine your first, any first date.
Right.
And I'm not a big one for, going, oh, let's experience this. But it's like some of that, you're like, just think about, when you were 13 and that first girl that you kind of went, oh, she's kind of cute.
But what do I do? Yeah.
I'm like, just figure you probably never kissed a girl before, so, know. And then, of course, he has that wonderful line that they wrote for Chris about, are you dreaming that I'm about to kiss you? And it's like, we all just kind of vomit.
Buddy barf.
It's like, really? It's like, it sounds like we switched to telenovela in that one line, and it's just ridiculous. But I'm really pleased with the way Cinderella's come out. Are there things I would have done different? Sure.
That's anything fresh, sure,
it's like, okay.
But the key thing is the audience, and I don't know if they related the story. There was a girl, I guess it was on the second row, and she's watching the scene where Cinderella's getting dressed down by her stepmother, and she was freaking out. She's Mommy, and the mother has to hug her,
I got the message. Leona made some little girl cry. I'm like, yes!
And then, of course, the redemption, Godmother comes in. Oh, I like the one night where people were clapping. And I found you, right?
Yes.
And everybody's like, yeah, it's all right. It's kind of that Cinderella happy ending that most of us want.
Right, and you're never.
We don't get in real life.
No, you're never.
We know it's not real.
No,
but we don't care.
Because I think of most all musicals, this is because it's based on the fairy tale.
Right.
It just has that. Everybody, even the guys who would not want to admit.
They would admit that.
No.
God, we're tough.
But I think that's one reason why I didn't want the character of Christopher to come off too macho.
Right.
I wanted him to be that little bit of awkward, because that's the place. All the little girls enter through Cinderella, and they play through Cinderella.
Right.
The only place the guys can enter through is through Christopher.
Right.
And they need to see, if he's just Mr. Schwa, Rico Suave coming in, then people are going to be like, that's not what, And, musicals inherently are not that kind of naturalistic kind of slice of reality.
No, absolutely, no.
But this one felt really important to make it as close to that as possible. How would I direct this if all the lyrics was just dialogue?
Right.
Really cheesy dialogue.
Right. Well,
But, and to get that so that, the boys can come into it too, because, as much as Chris should be Prince Charming, Cinderella should be that girl that you see from across the room, you're like, oh, she's out of my league, kind of thing, and really try to approach it that way, and just to make, as well as to make stepmother just as evil as possible, which was probably the hardest part of this whole show.
That was really tough for Leona.
She is such a nice person.
But you got to find it. You have got to find it.
And unfortunately, she didn't know me well enough, because if it was an actress I'd worked with before, I'd be like, hey, dude, just play me during Tech Week, because you'd be set. That would be the only note I'd have to give you. Just play me during Tech Week, and you'll have the character of the horrible stepmother. But yeah, I mean, she would go off stage during rehearsal and just give Kathleen a hug because she felt so bad. And I'm like, Kathleen's like, it's acting. It's fine.
Well, but it's just, I think it's so important to validate that, yes, I am just acting. I'm not really getting into this.
Exactly.
But,
because there'd be some people who could just take it and just run with it too far.
Absolutely.
Which I think is the reason why Stepmother works so well with Leona doing it, because she is such a nice person. It is truly acting. She has to put it on and turn it on.
Right.
And, that she has the most horrible, vicious line of the show.
Oh yeah.
With the, well, if my father were still like, well, he isn't. That is just awful.
And you see it in their faces too, because we were still, it's like, oh my goodness, that's Leona's
She
like,
went
oh
there.
crap.
She went
it's
there.
like, ooh.
But that one little scene between Cinderella and Stepmother really feels like it comes from a natural place.
Right.
It's the one section of dialogue in the show that actually isn't cheesy.
Right.
It's just mean.
Right. Yeah.
And Leona fought me for a little while on that. Number one, to get as mean as she needed to get.
Right.
And number two, I'm like, you don't have to look at her. She doesn't exist in your world.
That's right.
And that's really awkward for an actor. Just like silence is awkward for them. Cause
they always want to face each other.
I'm like, turn your back on her.
Yeah.
That's so mean.
Right.
You want to get somebody riled up when you're actually having a real fight in person? Right. Turn your back on them and walk away and still keep...
And by the way, it works really well on stage and film too, because we can see both your faces.
Right, exactly.
I don't have to see it back.
Exactly. But actors don't want to do that. So you have to rationalize it to them in the real world and say, okay, so she doesn't exist in your world. And once she kind of got it, then it was like, oh, I see. Yeah. And I think we really got to the point in this show, and it's totally to the credit of the actors really stepping up, where we were ready for Tech Week and we were ready for an audience. Had we had an extra week, I'd have been nervous that we would have been over-rehearsed.
We peaked too early. Yes, absolutely.
We needed another week for Tech.
Yeah.
For all the bells and whistles.
That's always that way.
All the bells and whistles, but as far as the actors were concerned, they were in the right spot at the right time.
They needed an audience.
And I can't necessarily take credit for that, because it was that they really stepped up. Because I always figure that we're still going to be going into Tech Week and we're still going to have issues that are actor related. But when I told them to be off book, my God, they were off book.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
There were line calls for maybe 2 or 3 days. Which I'm like, I'm okay with line calls. Yeah. But by this date, we got to be no more calling line. And even before we hit that magic date, we weren't really calling for a line. There'd be the occasional brain fart on stage, and they would all go.
That happens. Yeah.
But they wouldn't call for line because they knew it was brain fart, and the actors on stage would go, we're past this point, so let's move on.
Right.
And you expect that. I mean, you're going to get that in a performance, too, where somebody goes,
right.
I mean, Kathleen outed herself at pickup rehearsal. Afterwards, she was like, yeah, did you like that line that I totally made up? Because it was like, no matter how I said it, it wasn't coming out, big romantic scene of like, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, yeah, I was like, honey, I don't even hear it anymore. I assume you're where you need to be. I got 6 other things going on. I'm crawling around under the set while you guys are doing this nice little romantic scene, because, pickup rehearsal was the first time I had seen the scene with the whole Starry Night thing. I was like, oh, really? Is that what that scene looks like? I could hear it, and I was thoroughly confident of the actors about being out there for those last couple of rehearsals. Yeah. Because I'm like, they know us. Yeah. So I'm not going to worry about it. But the funnier thing would be they probably need to set up a video camera like tomorrow and record what's going on backstage during those cut-off scene changes.
Oh my goodness! Oh yeah. Well, that's true. Like I said, again, people haven't seen backstage because it's just magic to people. Things just happen, and the things, the flub, the people running into each other, or stubbing their toe, whatever, or barely making, it's like that. Quick, lights have to go up now. And because Cinderella has so much that is underscored by music, it's amazing that, you might have a brain fart, but you better do it to the beat.
Right, exactly. And that was one reason why I really wanted to can the show. Right. Because I'm like, when I thoroughly understood, there was something from the get-go that I said, I think this show needs to be canned. Right. There was just something in me that said, something about this tells me this. And then once seeing the score and, like, really sitting down with it, I was like, oh my God, this whole thing is to music.
Mm-hmm. It's very television-esque, yeah.
Well, since they wrote it for 50 Cent, and it doesn't even necessarily sound like Rodgers and Hammerstein, except that there's little, oh, look, listen, there's a little thing from South Pacific, and there's Oklahoma there, and you're like,
you hear the riffs, I recognize that.
Okay. Because a lot of it doesn't even necessarily fit into the traditional canon of Rodgers and Hammerstein, because you don't find the Cinderella music, except for maybe 10 minutes ago, on, like, the best of, the greatest hits of Rodgers and Hammerstein. You're not going to really find Cinderella on there anymore. No. But in some ways, it's not my most favorite Rodgers and Hammerstein musical. Yeah. But it has some kind of magic to it, and maybe because of how it came about. But yeah, you've got to with the canning of it. I'm like, with all of this music, we can't afford to have the musicians say, and I'll always blame musicians because I've
been there, done that.
been there, done that. I know.
Yeah.
You know, Sunday matinee, everybody's tired, and it's like, now we're going to play this at this speed. And Saturday night, we're ready to go out and do our next gig.
Right.
So everything's twice as fast.
Right.
And I'm like, with all this underscoring, we can't afford that. It needs to be set in stone so the actors can know it. Because they don't have time to sit and count the beat.
No.
But they can know. They should be able to hear it and know. I mean, prime example of that is in the ball with Miriam being the last one to dance.
Right.
I'm like, getting this ended is all on your shoulders.
Right.
Young lady. And she's like, what? I said, you need to know this music better than anybody. Because you have to know exactly where you are to know, do I extend it? Do I shorten it? You are the safety valve of this scene. Because we can't go past, you can't just say, I'm supposed to do this XYZ number of times.
Right.
You have to know.
Right.
And, you know, that's a lot to ask a 17-year-old for a show the first time she's done anything outside of a little high school, whatever.
Right.
But, you know, having the music canned was the best thing we did.
Oh, yeah. And the odd thing, you know, people say, you can the music? Well, that's anathema. You can't do that. But you know what? If we had put the 19 people in orchestra pit and mic, or not the orchestra pit because we can fit them, put them upstairs in the rehearsal hall and mic them, it wouldn't be any difference, except they wouldn't have kept time. It would have been different every night.
Right. Exactly.
And my pet peeve is always, I never know what musicians I'm going to get that night.
Exactly. So now we're doing, you know, especially this music was, when we canned it, like all the key changes, like, oh, let's talk through the key changes because there's 14 different keys in 5 pages, and this goes from cut time to you know, and you're like, what? But that was and I think we got a much fuller sound.
Well, absolutely, we got a full sound, and that's not that people don't know that it's canned, but it's a full sound.
Right.
You don't miss necessarily.
No, because if you don't, it'd be different if you, like you said, if you could see the orchestra in the orchestra pit. Right. If it was so you could pull it all back.
Or they're on stage, whatever, you know.
Then that's a whole different thing.
Right.
You know, if you're going to do Chicago, you don't really want to can the show because the orchestra...
They're part of it, yeah.
They're part of it. The band is part of the show.
Right.
For a show like this, they're backup.
Right.
That's all they are.
Yeah.
So, you know, no big deal as far as that goes. And I think it's made things a lot easier. Because we can do, if everybody's on point, you know, some of those scene change pieces of music are 27 seconds. And we can do them in the 27 seconds as long as people are paying attention. Right. You know, that doesn't provide for the lovely human error, as I see an actor who's supposed to be moving a set piece go, oh, no. It's like, really? Move. Right. But like we got into the Palace yesterday in the performance, literally the grand dropped and the lights came up exactly with the music. I was like, nice. And I'm on mic with, and Amy can't talk back to me on my lovely little mic setup, and I'm like, and that's how that scene change goes. Yeah. And she's like, yay. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's, you know, but you can do all of that. Yeah.
Well, Carol and I always talk about tech, and we always talk about the perfect tech show. Because I've never had a perfect tech show. I would love to do a perfect tech show one time where everything went exactly as planned and nobody noticed. Because that's the way it's supposed to be. Right. It would be lovely to do that, but there's always something.
There is something, and you know.
That's why it's live theater. It happens.
Well, yeah, and there's that many people, and especially with a show like this where this cast is the crew. Yeah. You know, in some cases they're doing triple duty. Sure. Yeah. There, and you're like, okay, so yeah, you have to come off in your scene, you have to move the set piece, and you got to do a costume change. And then you got to manage to get back on. That's right. You know, so, but they're doing it.
They're doing it. They're doing an incredible job.
And some of it I'm kind of, you know, would it be nice to have had a whole set crew? Sure, but I'm not quite sure where we would put them. Yeah, there's not that much room back there. No, because when we're all standing literally in the wings, ready to go for a scene change, right? There's no more room for anybody else. Right. you know, with the dressers backstage for Cinderella, when we had an extra dresser last night to learn the robes, it was like, there's an extra body in the way.
Yeah.
Or like Caleb coming back and singing.
Yeah.
Last night it was like, dude, you're in the way.
I could hear him. I heard him singing.
At one point, Amy just was like, she just moved in. She was just like, you're in the way. We have this down. You're just in the way. You know, and you know the stair unit and
there's so much.
All of that, but it all works, and then the experience of building a carriage and
oh my goodness,
figuring out how to do that.
Let's talk about the cast, because this is unusual. You know, I've done a lot of shows in 38 years, and I've never seen a cast gel so quickly. And sometimes casts don't even gel.
Right.
You know, sometimes you get these, especially in a large musical. This is not a large musical, but you end up with certain camps. I mean, everybody does the show, but you know, it could be. This was really, they did click.
Yeah, I mean,
really early.
Yeah, they do. I mean, there's been, you know, little things here and there.
There's always is, right?
But it's like any family. You spend that much time together, somebody's going to get pissed at somebody for some silly something.
Sure.
I mean, we even had one last night. It was like, really? We have 2 more shows. Get over it. You know, it was basically the end of my little discussion with people involved. 2 more shows. Get over it.
Right.
But yeah, it really, and it's sad to say, but the loss of our original Lionel really helped solidify that.
Yeah.
It was funny because the day I announced that he had resigned the role, everybody who'd been kind of just sitting around starting those first musical rehearsals suddenly it had a common enemy. It really just changed the whole tone of the room. It was like, seriously?
You abandoned us? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was kind of like everybody kind of ganged together and was like, okay, well, we can find somebody better than him. And suddenly, I think that was like the first instant where everybody went, we're in this together, which was not necessarily what you expect for that.
Right.
And then I think Kathleen and Lewis as the leads, I think they set really good examples. Mm-hmm. I mean, Kathleen's playing Cinderella, and who's here for set painting day? Yeah. She's the one rolling all this, you know, like... No, she's
wonderful, and it is important for leads to set the example for the rest of the cast.
So they've been great as far as, you know, leading the show, but the replacement of Lionel was Zach. If they're the brains, he's the heart. He's the thing that keeps everybody together. He is the one denominator that works amongst all the groups. It doesn't matter. He can deal with Marilyn and John as the king and queen. He can deal with the step family. He can deal with the mice and the cat. I mean, he deals with the kids fine. The you know, Brendy and Sharon and Miriam and Saj. He deals with all of them and kind of keeps everybody in their place. He's really the glue. And I told him that the other night. I said, you know, you have a very interesting personality. And he's like, is that good or bad? I'm like, I said, it's really good because he's the class clown without the jerk. Right. Because most class clowns have a certain level of jerk to them. Like, where you're just like, you laugh at them, but they're usually making fun at somebody's expense. Right. He's managed in his life to become the clown, the person that brings everybody together and excluding the jerk.
Well, essentially, because when we talked to Zach, he kind of models himself almost after Patch Adams. You know, he's in nursing, and I think it's going to serve him well. Because exactly. I mean, especially when you're sick, a little humor goes a long way. Right, and he's not afraid of the work. No. I mean, he walks in literally before the show. And he's like, "What can I do?" Right. And I'll be like, "You know the list of things. Go for it." Which is refreshing. People just walk in and go like, how come this isn't done? Why didn't somebody take out the garbage? Right. Like, well, then you've got Lewis before the show, every show sweeping the stage. Right. Yeah, it's awesome. He's like, you know, because actually little Sally Johnson was just like, do you need me to sweep the stage? And we're like, no, don't sweep the stage. Don't sweep the stage. Normally that would be a great thing. We'd be like, sure, go for it. And we're like, no, that's Lewis's thing. Right. He needs that. You know, part of it is just getting himself in the mood of what he's going to do. Right. But the other part is that's his way of helping. Right. So it's like, go for it. Well, I saw Kathleen and Lewis taking out the garbage. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times that's happened. I could probably count them on my hand, the people that do that. Right. That happen to be in the cast. Right. It's usually expected to be done. I mean, they're just... they're a really good group. Yeah. And it's a really mixed bag because you've got people who have a lot of experience and people who have like zero experience. That's right. This is their first show. Yeah. Ever. There's very few people in the middle group where they've sort of done shows. Right. You know, they're like
here's the people who've done a billion things, and then here's the people who've done nothing, and then the few stragglers in the middle. Because I figure until you've done at least 5 or 6 shows, you've basically done no theater.
Right.
Because you don't have enough experience to say you know anything.
Right.
Which served me well of doing all the educational theater, because I could look at them and go, okay, I can say this over here, and they'll understand this.
Right.
Now I need to explain it to you.
Right.
And I think that's where some people get frustrated with community theater, because you do get that.
Oh, it's a wide range
division.
of experiences. Yes, absolutely.
And if you're a director,
mm-hmm.
you think it's beneath you to explain it.
Right.
Or a lot of a lot of quote unquote directors around town don't want to deal with that.
Right.
Plus, they also see their job as, my job is just to block the show. Really? That is not your job.
Yeah.
Your job is so much more. And if you think that's your job, you need to not be a director.
Well, I think that, and especially in communities, I think a lot of people get into, I want to be a director because I have all this power and control. And you're like, you ain't got a clue what you've got to do.
And you have to use that power and control the right way, though. That's the problem.
Right.
Because you've got to convince people it's their idea to do things.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very important if you do that. Yes.
You know, it's like, you can't just come in and say, this is the way it will be done. Now, I do that sometimes. I'm like, do it because I need you to do it.
Right.
You know, but what's my motivation? Figure it out. I need you over here. Right. Do it because I said so.
Yeah.
You know, and I do a lot of do as I say, not as I do, like working on the tech stuff, and I'm like, this is not the way to do it. I've done this for 100 years.
Yeah.
Do not watch and imitate.
Right.
But there's a lot of directors who just, they come in and they go, well, this is my job, and it's like, well, you've not really ever directed a show if all you're doing is pushing actors around on stage.
Right.
Then, because the success or failure of a show should fall on the head of the director. And you can't go back, if the show doesn't work, you can't go back and say, well, it's because I didn't have this, that, and the other thing. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Figure it out. And you have to also understand, you're never going to get the credit for the success, because the credit for the success is going to go right to the actors.
Absolutely. They're the most visible part
it's going to go right to the actors.
You know, that's what people see. Yeah, absolutely.
People don't care. People always ask me, why don't you come up for the meet and greets? People don't care to talk to me.
No, that's right. Yeah.
They don't. And like wearing
it's like, who are you? Yeah.
Exactly.
And they just saw you on stage at the beginning, right?
Well, the funniest thing was, I literally, on Sunday for the first tea party, came out in my set change clothes.
Yeah.
And I'm standing there and talking to them, and the people are looking at me like, what? And I'm sweating because I have 8 layers on. So I went back and changed in the clothes I wore for my regular clothes, which is what I wore for the curtain speech.
Right.
I walked back out, take the exact same position, same people stand around, they're like, oh, the show was wonderful. I'm like, you realize I was just out here?
Right.
Just in
but they didn't recognize
different clothes.
Well, it's amazing what clothes can do.
And it was like, okay, fine, but they don't know what to say to me.
Yeah.
They go, oh, it was a really nice show, we really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
That's great and wonderful, but I don't expect to ever hear that.
Right.
You know, and I always throw actors under the bus that way, because I always be like, you know, now, I should get the credit, I should also get the blame. But guess who's going to take all the credit? You guys are. Right. And, you know, and they're like, we would never do that. But then again, you hear people talking to them, they're like, oh, such a, oh, you know, da-da-da-da-da.
Right,
it's like, yeah, you just threw me under the bus, so I'm going to throw you under the bus before you ever get there. But no, but that's the way it works. And if I do my job right, people should know what to say to me, because they should know what, the audience should know what my job was. It shouldn't be obvious
that you directed the show.
Right. My job should be invisible.
It's almost like blocking. If you can tell it's blocking, something's wrong. Right. If you can tell that this has been directed, okay, maybe there's something could have been done differently. Yeah.
Right, because it shouldn't
be that obvious.
You shouldn't see the hand of the director.
No.
Now, people who've seen me direct multiple things can look at certain scenes and go, that, you know, if they only saw that scene, they should be able to go, oh, Debbie directed that.
They know this is a Debbie moment.
Well, there's, the quiet on stage. The silence on stage is always a key. There will always find a moment to make there be quiet. Because I think that's important. I like silence.
Yeah. Well, it's very powerful when used properly, right?
You know.
And it is a very powerful moment. I know we're talking. Lewis is just standing there. That pool of light. It works.
Right.
It works.
But even when they crash into each other and they're like shuttling the things, and the only noise is the boxes and nothing else is happening, but then they see each other and it's just that. Oh wow, cool. You know, and there's nothing, and you can hear the audience go, when are they going to say something? When are they going to say something? And at the moment where the audience is just going to go, say something, they'll actually speak, you know, because you got to take the audience on that ride too. And, you know, directing is all ultimately audience manipulation anyway.
Yeah.
You manipulate the actors to manipulate the
The
audience.
audience. Yeah, hopefully it works.
Yeah. So far with Cinderella, it's gone okay.
That's
So,
right.
you know, it's, you know.
Oh, dear. Well, we're going to have you come back. This is going to be definitely a part one. So I got to ask you the question that I'm asking, and then have to be real, yes?
Okay.
If heaven exists, what do you want God to say when you get to the pearly gates?
What do I want him to say, or was he actually going to say? Because what he's going to say is, you here? I don't know. I guess probably what I'd want him to say is rehearsal starts in 5 minutes.
Yeah. And most of us, yeah, you know, we're short a director.
Yeah, exactly. And guess what? Unlimited budget. Unlimited budget and staff. There you go.
Money is no object.
Money is no object.
We got all the tech stuff you want. We got
exactly.
anything you want.
That's what that would be where it is.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for being with us, and we will definitely see you again.
Okay.